Welcome to the Channel Chat podcast. Hello, I'm Marc Sumner, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I have the privilege of having Jay McBain, the principal analyst at Forrester, in the house. How are we doing, Jay?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thanks so much for coming on. So, Jay, I want to take it back a bit because I know I read sort of somewhere that you started out as an IBM sales guy who started to pursue more data-driven approach to your sales. So can you tell me a bit about your background and how you got into sales?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in this industry 27 years. I was lucky coming out of college that I got an internship at IBM working in the help desk. And it was either that or a meat packing plant. And luckily, IBM decided to hire me. So maybe I'd be an influencer in the meat packing industry if that didn't happen. But yeah, I quickly went to sales because at IBM, that's the way to get ahead. I became a futurist, talked to kids in college and in schools, and, talked about some great things back then, playing Gary Kasparov in chess, this teleportation, Star Trek style. We just invented a human-based network where you could shake hands and exchange data. It was kind of a really cool time back in the industry in the early 90s.
And what inspired you to go to more of sort of an analytical role in the tech marketplace?
It was actually simple. I didn't drink. So I almost lost my job as a salesperson at IBM when my manager pulled me aside one time and said, and this was a quote, Jay, you can get better, but you can't pay more. At IBM, most of our deals, we close on napkins, at 2:00 in the hotel lobby bar. And if you're not drinking, your customer's not going to trust you drinking milkshakes, and you're just not going to close the deals. I don't think, I can't see how you're going to be successful. So I took that to heart. And, as a young kid, I didn't want to get fired. So I got in my car and I drove in the province in Canada that I was living at. I drove to every town. I drove thousands of miles and I was selling PCs. So I looked inside every window of every business and I wrote down every business and every PC I saw through the window. And I came home with 497 companies, and it became what I called the placemat. I had over 200 columns of information that I learned back then. This was kind of right as the internet was coming out, but I went to the public library and I recorded all the information about each company, their employees. There's no LinkedIn, obviously, so I tried to write down, but I knew what they bought for laptops and desktops and printers. I kind of knew which channel partner, so I just started filling out information to the point where I had this thing I called the unfortunate 500. There was 497 companies. And so I went on this path of 4 years of where we moved to 73% market share. Because one by one on this placemat, very tactically, very data driven, I attacked, Compaq and HP and the early days of Dell and Toshiba and everybody back then. Every day I attacked them full on. Unsolicited proposals, leather jackets, hockey games, which are big in Canada. I did everything to go in and win. Once I hit 73% market share, there's planes starting to leave Armonk, New York, the headquarters of IBM, to come to Winnipeg, Canada, because our market share was triple what the next biggest territory in the world. There was 400 territories at the time. And the biggest territory market share in the planet was like 30% or 28%. We were at 73. So they started deploying private jets to come look at the placemat and start talking about this data-driven approach to selling.
What's your view on that nowadays? Obviously, we've sped forward. There's much more information. There's LinkedIn, etc. But it still goes on about the whining and dining salespeople against the data-driven. So what's your own view? Is there a place for both now, or do you think it should be all data-driven from now on?
No, I think there's a place for both. And by the way, most of the relationship, if you look over my shoulder, I have a lot of logo charts. I have a lot of data analytics behind the scenes. In the lower right, I will tell you there's 150 events per year in the managed services industry alone.
Wow.
And I'll tell you, more deals are done at that hotel lobby bar. I actually publish the top 100 people who are doing those deals. I can track them across the magazines and the podcasts and the associations. I score them. I score over 5,000 people. But I know who the best and brightest are. And when I was a sales rep using these data techniques, I didn't go to the hockey game. I sent somebody who was a great relationship person that could spend the time in the box with that customer, selling them and sign, on the napkin at the end of the game, the deal. And I was more of a quarterback calling the play and then letting the rest of the team, make the play happen. So that's the data in the channel now is you need great relationship salespeople to make these deals, but you need a quarterback that has the play drawn up and can get them the ball to make the play.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about where we are now, Jay. Obviously, the last 12 months has been pretty traumatic for most people in the industry or in the world, obviously. How do you think the channels cope with the challenges over the last 12 months?
Well, I think the channel as a total has hit a home run. Early in the pandemic, every government viewed the channel as an essential service, and they delivered. We took every laptop out of the supply chain. We all became UCaaS experts overnight. This remote work, within days, companies were back up and running again from a major human-based failure. And the channel was the one behind that. And then a month or two later, the conversations got deeper. There's new threat vectors, security. There's new risk. There's new compliance. There's new continuity. There's new governance here. There's a lot of things going on in this new remote topology, which doesn't look short term. This pandemic could go on for a couple of years. Well, we know the future of work, 20 to 30% of people have a very different future of work from this point forward. So this new remote topology was right in the channel's wheelhouse. And again, they hit a home run and they continue to hit a home run. It's back growing double digits again, just in managed services to handle this demand. Yeah,
because you spend a lot of time sort of discussing technology industry with a wide range of vendors and distribution and channel partners. What do you think are going to be the key trends that we ought to be aware of in 2021?
Yeah, so every year I write kind of the David Letterman top 10 list of trends, and there are things that are massive, and they're more monumental changes in the last 12 to 18 months than we've seen in the last 39 years. This move to ecosystems. When IBM last week announces $1 billion in ecosystem investment, we have channel professionals that wouldn't even know where to start spending that money. There are new people and processes and programs and technology to drive ecosystems. We've seen the rush to subscription and consumption models. So I'll go back to the 1990s again. Cisco, Dell, HP, IBM, and others have all committed to a 100% subscription model. This whole era of client server is now 30 days with the customer, like Netflix. And this is touching every company. Subscription, consumption, embedded, white labeled models, marketplaces becoming the digital connective tissue of all of that, where the $3.5 trillion business level industry that we're in will become 17% marketplace within the next 12 months. And partners have a huge opportunity there. Vendors do. Distributors are going through the transformation to take advantage of it as well. But the fact of the matter is it changes everybody's life. All of our cheese got moved given these big monumental changes happening with the buyer and with obviously the way they consume technology.
Yeah, because in the early days of the pandemic, there was a lot of businesses that simply were not prepared to sort of work from home, and it took a lot of time to sort of optimize their workforces. How do you think you've mentioned it already of the kind of consumption model, but how do you think the demand for tech will evolve by the end of the year? We had in March, April last year, buying of laptops that just weren't in the supply chain, and then headsets, etc. How do you think it's going to evolve in the next 12 months?
Yeah, so for the first time in our industry, going back 4 decades, it's a tale of two cities. Every time we hit a recession like 2008, 2001, everything kind of came up and down and the peaks and valleys. Well, today it's a K-shaped recovery. On one side, you've got traditional computer infrastructure and telco infrastructure down by double digits. You've got traditional tech consulting and system integration work down by double digits. Managed services is down by 1.9% in that first year of the pandemic. Well, on the other side, last week, you'll notice Microsoft announced 50% growth of Azure. That's after 48 and 47. 3 quarters into the pandemic, they're still at 50% growth. Google Cloud is at 54. The head of AWS just got a big promotion a couple of weeks ago. So the SaaS companies, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday, Marketo, NetSuite, are growing in the 30s. RPA companies are growing triple digits. Automation, cloud acceleration. There are things growing off the charts. And for partners and for vendors, it's this idea of what side of the ledger are you on? Are you on the double-digit decline in products and maybe at a double-digit decline if you call on hospitality, retail, restaurants, certain industries? Where on the other side of the ledger, you might be growing by 50 to 100% or more, calling on technology, selling multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, automation, customer experience type technology. So, we have partners that are just growing off the hook, and we have other partners that are facing a very, challenging future.
And how do you think the partners that are having a challenging future? They obviously want to make that transition. Are you seeing lots of partners suddenly thinking, actually, if I don't make the shift, I'm going to be seriously left behind?
Well, absolutely, and resell is a key part of this conversation. Which in the client server era, all the big companies I just mentioned, minus Dell, we're at 80+% channel sourced. Microsoft's at 96. The point is all of client server was resold and bought through distribution and distributed through a linear supply chain. Today, after 20 years of SaaS and multi-cloud, we're only at 20 to 30% resold. The fact of the matter is there's now a multiplier, though. For every dollar that kicks out in cloud, there's $5 for a partner to go get. But the partners have been slow to recognize what skills, what practices they need to build to go ask for $2 for every dollar the customer's going to spend in SaaS or infrastructure or any elements of hybrid cloud. So that's where the big divide is right now, this multiplier effect. And it's not winning 20% of the deal. It's going to ask the customer for 200% of the deal at 75% margin. So this is where the divide is. Those partners that are growing by triple digits, right at the top, you can mimic what an Accenture does, for example. They're now the biggest technology company in the world by employee size. They acquire a new company every 7 hours. They're very much focused on going to ask the customer. And it doesn't matter if it's a mid-sized clinic. It doesn't matter if it's a Fortune 100. They're not just stuck up at the top anymore. They'll go and acquire a digital agency or an accounting firm in upstate New York that handles mid-sized clinics. And they'll go get 80% share. They'll be in the room influencing every one of those deals. And they look at it very much as, how do I go ask for $2 or $3 for every dollar of vendor money that customer's going to spend? They're confident in doing that. They built the skills, they built the practices, and there are elements of our channel that are flooding in from the outside that aren't so tagged to this resell element. They think that the non-transactional elements, influence and retention, are so much more profitable, so much more sticky, and so much more long-term than how we look at the technology market looking backwards.
Yeah, how do you think these partners now, because this digital transformation was accelerated over the last 12 months, and it was quite new to a lot of partners out there. Even though they were talking about it, they took a long time to get up to speed. How do you think they now can maximize the opportunity for them? Because it's coming now, isn't it? It's going to be hopefully a real boom over the next 12 months.
Yeah, there's a couple of steps. One is find out what customers are buying. When I said that the biggest opportunity is automation, you think about RPA, UiPath, Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism are growing by triple digits. They're going public soon. The no-code, low-code environments around SaaS is growing off the charts. When I talked about the 50% growth across the hyperscalers and the 30% growth across the SaaS industry, you got to go over to where customers are spending money first. Then when you find, whether it's your current vendors or other vendors that you choose to bring on, go and ask them what their multiplier is. If you go ask Google today, it's $5.32. You can download the report on how much of that is professional services. It's 64%. So there's other software, there's other hardware, but 64% of that multiplier is services, installation, implementation, integration, security, compliance, continuity, data, automation. All the downstream benefits. And if I'm going to choose to partner with Google or AWS or any of these companies over here, or UiPath, I want to stare at that pie chart and make sure, do I have the skills and certifications? Do I have repeatable business processes and practices? And do I have the sales and marketing chops to go and maybe have the audacity to go ask the customer in a $100,000 Google deal to go ask them for $200,000 to make it work? That's the future channel. And if you're still thinking about making 20% of that Google deal and trying to make a percent of volume rebate and MDF funds and new customer bonuses, you're not thinking with the future in mind.
Yeah. Now, recently, can you tell our audience about the Channel Influencer of the Year award? You know, what does that mean to you? That's obviously must be a great honor to get that.
Well, I spent my whole life trying to get on the cover of GQ, and in the end, I end up on the cover of a Channel magazine. But I will tell you, my mom is very proud, and my kids, I can hold up a magazine cover and say, Dad made it, and I can retire with that on my epitaph.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. How did it actually come about? How did you know it was going to be produced?
Well, one is that was in the telco industry. The channel partners, channel futures, they have kind of both technology and telco, and just spent a lot of time in that community as well as other communities. Like over my shoulder, you'll see that there's just so much decentralization in our market. There's, I published the 64 podcasts. I published the 54 magazines, the 24 associations. We are not lawyers. We're not doctors, and we're not accountants. We're not all part of the same association, and we don't all pay our same dues. So understanding this market is understanding the communities that partners and vendors and distributors and all of us, what we read, where we go, and who we follow is absolutely critical. And partners need to think about this in terms of their own ecosystems and their customers. Vendors need to think about this because I think about 99% of them get it wrong. They spend too much time navel gazing about their deal reg program in the boardroom and not enough time on this channel chat, on others, and in, plugged into those hotel lobby bars. They're underfunding the whole point of their existence, which is getting into the conversation.
And why do you think that is, Jay? Because I hear a lot about that all the time, that there's not enough conversations going on with the end user customer, and they're sort of like, they are complaining about deal regs, the deal I didn't get, the money I didn't get this, the sponsorship I didn't get from the vendor, or the MDF I didn't get. Why is it always so complaining towards, what hasn't happened? Because there is a lot of that going on.
It's uncomfortable. It's hard to measure. And for many companies, the 18 months of a community play is hard to stomach financially.
Right.
When you're reporting publicly every quarter, it's hard to spend some money that you don't see the results for. It's like building a channel. It just takes a while to franchise. But the fact of the matter is, we have companies now, and I used to work for one, Autotask, which became Datto, which became a unicorn, which now went public a month or two ago, and is now worth $4 billion. They did that without a VP of sales and a VP of marketing. It was all channel, all the time, and it was all community. And a good friend of mine from Canada, Rob Ray, kind of led a big team of community managers, making sure that they were impacting every logo on my chart and every hotel lobby bar conversation. And here's a company that's worth $4 billion that never ran a Super Bowl ad, never put up a billboard, never had a whole set of cubicles, selling hard, but took a community approach. And I remind companies as big as Microsoft that, they've got tens of thousands of people in the channel, and they're all stuck in the boardroom thinking that they're one, program element away, or one product element, or one of the 4 Ps. I worked at IBM, I worked at Lenovo. I was in these meetings thinking we were just one price point away. We were one promotion away. The 4 Ps you learn in college. If we just crack that one, new product, we're going to win SMB. It's not until I, moved to the United States, figured out who the top 100 people are, figured out the 150 events, and I bought a bunch of plane tickets myself to go get into those conversations. Did I learn that, spending $150,000 in travel money and some sponsorship money, that it returned $365 million in laptop sales. in a year. And by the way, that was the year that Lenovo overtook Dell and HP to become number one in the world. Figuring out SMB for 100 years that IBM never could was as simple as a community play and having a community leader that can engage and influence the influencers. Again, 99% of companies don't get this. And it's one of these simple things that just have so many examples of where companies have leveraged it to become unicorns or much bigger than they should be.
Yeah, brilliant. And my last question for you, Jay, you mentioned obviously you've got some predictions for the next 12 months, but if you were going to give me your top 3 predictions that's going to happen for the next 12 months in the IT channel, what would they be?
Well, there's a number of them. So, the number one prediction is actually a joint prediction across ecosystem. This $1 billion investment you read about last week from IBM, you're going to see hundreds of companies follow. You're going to see the channel leaders that have come up through decades start to be replaced in some cases by ecosystem leaders that believe in transacting and non-transacting partners, believe in traditional and non-traditional partners, and can understand something that's 10 to 100 times larger. So that's one piece of it. And then the biggest change I think is going to happen is 17% of all of our top line revenue is going to go into these digital marketplaces. When you think of software, there was a company yesterday, Tackle, that just took a $35 million investment by Anderson Horowitz, the people who choose the winners in our industry. They chose Twitter, they chose Facebook, they've chosen every winner in our industry over the last 20 years. They've now put 35 million into a marketplace company, and they're choosing this as the way B2B is going. So if you think about 17% of your company's revenue growing more in 3 months during the pandemic last year than the last 10 years combined, and understanding now all subscription models, consumption models, how all of embedded and white labeled models, hardware, software, and services in the future are going to be consumed, you're going to have to start hiring marketplace SEO. You're going to have to hire marketplace community people. You're going to have to figure out how to win across 20 different marketplaces, no matter who you are in this industry. And the economic value and the winners and losers 10 years from now, when we go and re-record this and look backwards, are going to be the ones that got this right. It is a monumental shift, and it changes everything: people, processes, programs, and technology underneath it in terms of how this is all going to take shape.
Jay, you've been a fantastic guest. Thanks very much for your time.